everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to Sinead from the Isle of Man Samaritans. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi Sinead, how are you?
I'm good, Evie. I'm really excited to be here. I feel really privileged actually to be your guest because I've been following you on Facebook. So I'm feel very honoured to be here.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for following the podcast. It's such a privilege to have you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
So what have you been up to today?
Well, I started my day at 5 o'clock this morning, would you believe? I was on shift. So I did a shift from 5 o'clock till 8 o'clock this morning, which was very early, and it was quite cold, and the back door to my car was frozen. But it's okay. I mean, I don't mind getting up early in the morning to be there for people when, life is difficult, particularly at night. So it's nice to be able to be there for folk when they're struggling.
Yeah, definitely. It has been cold all day this morning.
Definitely. It's still cold now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, our car was covered in frost.
Yeah.
When Mum had to de-ice the car when we went out this morning, so I can only imagine what it would have been like about 5 a.m.
Yeah, it was fairly cold. I was quite lucky that the car wasn't covered in ice, but the back door was frozen solid. So yeah, had a good cup of tea when I got there.
That's good. Just warm yourself up.
Warm myself up.
And a bit of caffeine
Absolutely.
as well.
Oh yeah, definitely needed at that time of the morning for sure.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So you are here today to tell us about the Samaritans and the lovely work that they do.
Yeah.
So to begin with, what is your role within the Samaritans and why did you decide to join?
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm a listening volunteer with Samaritans, which means I answer phone calls, but I also provide support by online chat and email. So Samaritans do that in addition to listening. So I'm a listening volunteer, but I also have other roles in the branch. I'm on the branch leadership team. I'm one of the trustees of the branch. And one of my roles is to make sure that people know about Samaritans and the work that we do. So this very much chimes in with that role, to share awareness about the work of Samaritans. So what made me join? I moved to the Isle of Man in 1992 when I was 22. And I wanted to do something in the community. I grew up in a family where contributing to the community was definitely something that I saw in my parents and my grandparents. So it was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I saw an advert in the newspaper for Samaritans were looking for volunteers, and I thought, I'll do that. So it was no more fancy than that. It was just seeing an advert for that and getting involved, in 1994. So that was quite a long time ago now. And I did take a break. I took a break when my son was born, and I went back in 2009.
Right, okay. I mean, that's interesting that, like, obviously you knew you wanted to help out in some way, and that ad just, like, came along almost at the right time.
Yeah. A few people said to me at the time, like my parents said to me at the time, "Oh, you don't want to do that. That's, you'll take everyone's problems home, and you won't be able to cope with what you hear on the phone." And I've never felt that. I've always felt very, very privileged to be there for people when they're feeling not how they want to feel, and they're feeling unhappy or bereaved or whatever the case may be. It's really big privilege to be there for them.
Oh yeah, definitely. So can you tell me about the training you have to undertake to become a Samaritan?
Yeah, so it's changed a lot over the years since I started. But now what we do is we have a selection process, because volunteering for Samaritans isn't for everyone. It requires sort of a specific type of person, and it also requires a person that's well enough in their own mind to take everybody else's pain on board. So we have a sort of selection process to start with, and if you get through that, you go into what we call core training. So you're nowhere near the telephone at this stage, and you have about 6 to 8 modules to do. Now, some of those are face-to-face, but some of them are online as well. And we do a lot of skills practice in that. So role play, I don't know how you feel about role play, but a lot of people don't like it. And it's practicing for, how calls might go and the best way to deal with them. So that takes about 5-6 weeks. After that, you're allocated a mentor who can do the sort of same shifts as you. And you do all your shifts with a mentor and another volunteer for about 6 weeks. And then at the end of that, you end up in what we call embedding. And embedding is one more sort of training session a month for about 4 months. So it takes sort of 6 months from you expressing interest to you actually graduate to be a fully fledged Samaritan volunteer. And there's a really interesting thing about Samaritan volunteers that I want you to know, and that is we all have numbers.
Oh, right.
So I am Sinead 121, and that's how I'm known in the branch. So every Samaritan volunteer has a number. And we know each other by our numbers. So sometimes we don't know each other's surnames, we just know our numbers. So it's quite an interesting fact about Samaritan volunteers that we all have our numbers. And we're very proud of when we graduate through our training and get our number. It's a very big thing.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be a really nice feeling of like accomplishment that you finish your training. And,
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
So why is it that you all have numbers?
I don't actually think I know the answer to that. I wish I did. It would mean my Samaritan history would be a lot better than it is. It possibly goes back to, how Samaritans began and the very first branch of Samaritans. But I don't know the honest answer to that question. I'll have to look it up now, Evie, that you've asked me.
Yeah, it would be quite interesting.
I'll have to find out why Samaritans have numbers like that.
Yeah, because you said it and I was like, oh, I wonder why.
I will make a promise to you that we'll find out. I will let you know.
Thank you. So if someone was to ring the Samaritans, would they speak to the local branch, or is everyone fed through to the UK call centre?
So they might speak to the local branch, but an important thing to know is that we don't do any call tracing. We don't know where people are calling us from, but it's free to call Samaritans, and the number that everyone uses to contact Samaritans now is a 6-digit number, 116123. And you're right that when the call is made, it goes through to basically a computer, and the computer feeds it out to the volunteer who's next available to take the call. So if you're calling from the Isle of Man, that means that you could be speaking to any branch anywhere in the UK or Northern Ireland. So that's good for people on the Isle of Man, because I think sometimes people worry that they're going to be talking to their next door neighbour or somebody that knows them. And it's also good for us as volunteers, because we don't have to be concerned about that either. I work in quite a public facing job. I have a very recognisable accent and and a recognisable name. So I wouldn't want anyone to be put off and think, oh no, I don't want to phone because I know she's a Samaritan volunteer and I don't really want to be talking to her. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good.
What would you say the benefits are for someone to speak about their problems with someone that doesn't know them?
I think one of the best things about talking to Samaritans is, well, if I use an example, I think in a lot of ways in life, when you're upset about something or down about something and you talk to a friend or whatever, they want to make you feel better. They want to say, oh, don't worry about that, Evie. Sure, you've got Sinead from Samaritans coming in to talk to you today. Everything's fine in your world, kind of thing. And they try to tell you not to feel how you feel. And Samaritans don't do that. We listen to how you are feeling and we acknowledge how you are feeling. And that's really quite important, because I don't think that happens a lot in life, to be honest. And we can also ask questions that perhaps family members mightn't feel comfortable to ask. We don't know you. We don't make any assumptions about you. You don't know us. We're not worried about whether you're going to like us or not. We're just there to help you explore how you feel. And I think people find that objectivity really quite helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right about sometimes you don't want to be told not to feel what you're feeling. You just want your feelings to be recognised, because we all feel upset and we all feel down, and that's okay.
You're absolutely right. So when you're ready to volunteer with us, come along and make your application. No, but you're absolutely right. That's so very, very true. And people deserve to be heard and acknowledged and validated. And I don't think everybody always gets that.
Definitely. So the cover that the Samaritans provide is 24/7.
It is.
365 days per year.
Yes.
And obviously, like you've mentioned, is all volunteer based. On average, how many calls do you receive a day?
Ooh, that's a very good question, and I'm going to answer it in a slightly different way. And we were talking earlier about how I'm not very good at maths.
That's all right. Neither am I. It's fine.
Okay, so we get one call every 10 seconds. Right. And I'm not sure how many seconds there are in a day, but we'll let the mathematicians out there work that out. Can figure that out. They can figure it out.
That's fine.
Absolutely. So I was talking to someone recently, and I shared with them that in every second of 2022, there was a Samaritan volunteer on the phone. So that kind of gives us an idea of how much in demand the service is, because if every second of a year someone was on the phone, there's a big demand for the support service that we provide.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's when you actually think about it, it's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And sometimes when we're on shift, you can see how many volunteers are on shift across the various branches, and there might be upwards of 200 volunteers on shift at once, and yet we still have a queue of callers waiting, which is difficult because you don't want anyone to have to wait for the phone to be answered. But I think the demand is outstripping the supply right now in terms of how quickly we can answer everybody's call.
Yeah, definitely. So what can someone expect when they ring the Samaritans, and how do you help your callers?
Okay, so if you ring Samaritans, the phone will ring 3 times. And that's something that we abide by. So when we're trained, we're even trained in our skills practice, ring, 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 and that's how we start our skills practice. So we let the phone ring 3 times, and that's so we don't surprise the person on the other end, and it gives us time to also prepare ourselves for what might be on the end of the phone, because we don't know what we're going to be dealing with. So if I'm answering the phone at Samaritans, the important thing is I don't say, "Samaritans, can I help you?" That sounds very call centre-y. We're trained very early on to bring our voices down and very calmly say, "Samaritans, can I help you?" So that's how I would sound when I answer the phone. And then the caller can say anything they feel comfortable with. But sometimes people don't actually want to say anything at all. And that's okay too. If someone just wants to sit in silence, just know that there's somebody else there with them, that's fine. But the principal way I think we help callers is we really, really listen. So we listen for the things that are said, we listen for the things that aren't said. And when I'm mentoring a new Samaritan, I often talk about, imagine stones on the beach, and you have to keep turning the stones over to see if there's anything underneath the stone. So if someone's talking about their family and they've mentioned their mum, but they haven't said anything about dad, we might say, oh, you know, how are things with your dad then? Just to see if there's anything there that we need to explore. So it's really about very much the power of listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously about the power of listening, and I guess, like you mentioned with the stones, maybe looking for those slightly finer details.
Yes, absolutely. And just hearing sort of passing phrases, words, and not making assumptions. I think that's another big thing. Not assuming that you know what that person means, clarifying what they mean, giving them ownership of what they mean. So if someone says, for example, my partner, well, we can't assume that's a male partner just because we're talking to a female, or a female partner just because we're talking to a male. So all of that is very important as well, like really listening to our callers and making them feel that we're alongside them in whatever they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. So you must have to deal with some quite upsetting and challenging calls. How do you manage that?
So we have a really good support system in Samaritans. There's always two of us on shift together. We do our shifts in our centre, which is in Victoria Place in Douglas, which is the little lane that runs up from Wineright at the bottom of Victoria Road. And so your co-volunteer is your immediate source of support, and they're always aware of what's going on for you. But we also have a leader for every shift, and the leader's at home. And we phone the leader at the start of the shift to let them know that we're there and that we're ready to go. But most importantly, we phone them at the end of the shift and we talk through our calls with them. And their job is to make sure that we're okay. So if we have an upsetting call, we can talk to the leader about it. And quite often the leader will phone us the next day or get in touch and just check in with us as to how we are. So there's a structure above the leaders as well. So the leaders have support too, if something they've heard has affected them. But the support network in Samaritans is very important, because without it, I don't think we'd be able to keep coming back and listening to people in the way that we do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, you know, the role of the Samaritans is to help other people with their problems, but it's also important to make sure that your mental health is okay as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, mental health is one of those things that I don't think you can put a price on. Looking after your emotional well-being is very important. And that's, you know, when I was saying about where we start the process for new volunteers, when we're interviewing people, we are really keen to find out how they are in themselves, because lots of people come to Samaritans because they've maybe used the service or they've had good support. We need to make sure they're in a good place themselves before we, you know, put that onto them, that they have to absorb somebody else's pain potentially.
So do you find that there are trends on the nature of calls you receive depending on what's going on in the world at different times of year?
Well, obviously now in the run up to Christmas, people start talking about that. People start talking about Christmas in and about October, to be honest. And you know, there's people that aren't looking forward to Christmas for various reasons, or they're talking about the cost element of it. That's probably the only kind of cyclical thing that we see. But what we really noticed during COVID was how, for the first 3 months of COVID, everybody talked about COVID. Like every single call was about some aspect of COVID. And that was really quite unusual, because as volunteers we usually listen to such a wide range of things that listening to the same topic, and I guess when it was, you know, first lockdown and there were all sorts of things happening that we as humans were frightened about too, and yet callers were talking about, you know, all of the things that we were worried about as well. So I guess that was a pretty unique time to be a Samaritan volunteer during COVID and supporting people. We were very lucky to be classed as key workers really early on in the pandemic, which meant that we could continue our service. So yeah, between COVID and Christmas, I think that's probably the only kind of trend, because people talk to us about absolutely everything.
I can imagine that. I mean, I think for everyone, when COVID started, everyone was a bit like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think it was a very, very strange time for people.
I mean, for you guys, I really felt for you guys at school, or not at school, as the case may be, having to study from home and all of the pressure that put on you. And my son's 26 now, and I said to him, I'm so glad that this happened after you were at school, because I can't imagine how difficult it would have been to homeschool and work. And so I really feel for the younger generation who missed out on, 2 years and had to really find a way through that.
It was weird, because the way it fell for me, the first lockdown was when I was in year 6.
Right, okay.
And the second and third were when I was in year 7.
Oh, right. So you had that transition.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What basically happened, because the first lockdown was in year 6, I don't think they managed to get all the testing done that they probably should have done, before they moved kids up to high school. And so year 7 was full of tests, but then had the second and third lockdown as well, which then meant they couldn't do all the tests they needed to do. And it was weird, because for me, I couldn't really, because I'm visually impaired, it was a lot harder for me to do learning from home. So the vision support service over here were brilliant, and I had video calls every day, because they support me in school anyway, and how we did it was video calls in the morning,
right,
and then one of them would, obviously taking all precautions, drop round a load of work every week, and then I'd do independent work in the afternoon.
Right, okay.
But it was weird, and I especially feel for younger kids who maybe had the lockdowns when they were in reception, because obviously when you're 4 or 5, you can't really understand what's going on.
No, you're right. But having said that, if you've transitioned from primary school, if you like, to high school during that COVID period, you've missed out on all that kind of transitioning that usually happens. You go to your school when you're still in year 6 and you have that experience and everything else. So I can't imagine what it must have been like. I mean, I was working from home and it was quite nice to just...
Yes, my mum said that.
Yeah, it was nice in one way. But I always feel for all the people who didn't have that experience, or maybe were trying to work from home off the side of a coffee table, or, with younger kids running around and not able to sort of concentrate and all those things.
I know, and especially for kids as well. I also felt who couldn't do their GCSEs or couldn't do their A-levels that they've worked so hard for.
Oh, you're right,
and then weren't able to do them and had to go off, I think it was predicted grades.
Yes, although some of that sounds quite attractive when you've done your A-levels. You think predicted grades would have been quite nice without having to sit the exam.
Well, if it's the other way around, you're like, I wish I could have gone off predicted grades.
Without having to do A-levels and O-levels. That shows you how old I am talking about O-levels. But
that was that GCSEs? And
that was what GCSEs used to be called in the good old days,
Right,
indeed.
okay. So, do the Samaritans work alongside or in conjunction with any other local agencies?
We do try to be as involved in the local community as we can. So we're part of the Chamber of Commerce charity cluster, and we recently did a really nice event with I'll Listen. So we know that I'll Listen provide great support, particularly within the school environment. And we had a really good speaker that spoke at one of our conferences. The lady's name was Satvir Nijar, and she talks about self-harm. So we did an event for parents and carers of young people that self-harm in conjunction with I Listen, and we brought Satvir over, and it was a really successful event, and there was lots of really good feedback. So we like to collaborate with other charities as much as we can, but we also recognise that the support that we provide, the emotional support that we provide, and because we provide it to people outside of the island as well as on the island, sometimes that needs to be respected, and where Isle of Man charities can contribute, that's unique to them and unique to the people that live on the Isle of Man. So we support as much as we can with local initiatives, but I guess we're in a little bit of a unique position with the fact that some of our callers, a lot of our callers, could be outside of the island.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can people do to help the Samaritans?
Well, if you're interested in volunteering with us. In addition to what we call listening volunteers, we also have support volunteers. And support volunteers are people that don't want to listen on the phone, don't want to provide emotional support, but they like what Samaritans do, so they might support us in other ways. So, for example, we've got volunteers who help us with administration, volunteers who help us with the finance side of running the branch. So we're particularly keen, if you know anyone, we have a website which is kind of not falling into disrepair, but we need someone with web skills who will help maintain the website, because it's one of those jobs that just doesn't seem to ever really get done, and I don't personally have the time to do it. I'd love to be able to devote the time to it. So support volunteers are really, really helpful. I think that one of the biggest things that people can do is understand that Samaritans are there. You don't have to be in crisis to contact Samaritans. Lots of people think you do. And I even had a caller this morning who said, I've never contacted Samaritans before because I didn't think I was bad enough, if you know what I mean, and didn't think that their mental health or their emotional well-being was that bad that they needed Samaritans. So we need people to advocate for us and say, you know what, Samaritans are there for you regardless of how bad you feel. Even if you feel a little bit bad, they want to hear from you before it gets to crisis. So for people to share that they know about Samaritans and that they know how to contact Samaritans is a really big thing as well. We're very lucky from a financial point of view. The branch is quite financially healthy, so we don't necessarily always say to people, you need to fundraise for us, because we don't. We much more prefer people to know about us and spread the word.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all about getting the word out there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, another reason why I'm so delighted that you asked me to be here today.
Well, thank you so much
thank you, Evie,
for coming onto the podcast. It's been lovely to meet you, and I really appreciate you coming to talk to me.
Thank you. And I really feel honoured to have been a guest.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to my audience for listening, and I will see you all next time.